Danielle, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you to Audra, Sarah, Danielle, everyone with both Tackle What's Next and Her Next Play in making this happen. One thing that I reflect on going back to that transition time for me from being a student athlete was that I wish there were more organizations like this that could have assisted with the transition. So we really appreciate everything that you guys are doing, and thank you for this time. Courtney, Crystal, and Charma, looking forward to getting to know you ladies a little bit. I don't know about you, and I know we'll share some stories over time here, but as a student athlete, I thought I was looking forward to that moment that I would wake up and had control of my own time, right? No weights, no study hall. I'm like, okay, so that happened for me eventually after my final game of my college career, and I thought it was going to be awesome. Well, it was for about a day. And then I realized that soon my meal card wasn't going to work anymore. I wouldn't have a dorm room to live in. My schedule was totally up to me, which was so scary. So it could be really a scary time when you realize that it's now time to chart your own path. And let's just start with, and Courtney, I'll start with you. I wasn't thinking about my next career. Well, not enough, right? Leading up to the end of my time at Wake Forest as a student athlete. How did you decide what you wanted to do next once you figured out that it was all on your plate?
Yeah, I would say I was similar to you in that I was excited to, get out of college, start my life in the real world. I knew it was going to be hard, but when I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do, I had really great relationships with my professors in the media department. And I talked to them all the time about kind of where I should go with media. And then also our school had a success center, and I spent a lot of time there with mock interviews, kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. So I was really fortunate in that our school really cared about our careers at Augustana. But I think, so I played volleyball, which is a fall sport. And that semester after I got done, that was crazy. I was just researching, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And it was stressful because a lot of my friends were still, juniors and sophomores, and they didn't have to deal with this transition and this stress. So it was a really difficult time, but I would say that my professors definitely helped me out.
That's so good to hear, because I know the one overarching feeling was, who's going to help me with this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when I reflect back, you're never going to be in a place in your life when you have more people that care about your well-being than when you're on a college campus.
Exactly.
Professors, your academic advisors, your athletic trainers. So for those of you that are still there, think about connecting with those people now, but even if you've gone on, those are maybe some people that you can reach back to. Crystal, how about you? How did you kind of decide at that moment or find your way when basketball was over for you?
Yeah, for sure. So with me, I call myself an outlier because I knew I was going to be prepared for life after sports, but because I was so connected not only to my academic advisors, but my professors and then the people within the athletic department. So, with basketball, it's a fall sport, but then it also goes into spring as well. So yes, I had the idea that I wanted to go pro and go overseas, but I knew I had to. And my parents always taught me, like, yes, basketball is cool and all, but make sure that you take care of academics first. And so in the fall, I started looking for graduate assistant jobs. And so when I was in my season, I was applying and I was also interviewing for those grad assistant jobs. I ended up getting the grad assistant job at the University of Arkansas. And because of the relationship I had with the athletic director before he went to the University of Arkansas, he was kind of like the gatekeeper to actually get me into that graduate assistant job and the program at the University of Arkansas. So that was how I decided to go into the master's program after graduation, and the fact that I blew out my knee again. So that kind of helped the fact that, well, you're not going overseas. So that was one of the things that helped me think about my career for life after sports.
You're definitely somebody I wish I was hanging out with during that time. You were on the right track. Something you said, something you just described also brings up a thought for me. It's like, when I was a student athlete, I never felt like I had enough time, right? And you don't. You're stretched. Like, Yes. You have your practice and you got your weights, you got all those different things. I just remember feeling I don't have time to do anything else. But you kind of have to make time, right? Whether for me, there was no Instagram, so I was on Instant Messenger or, doing random stuff. Take some time like you did and really start to be proactive about it and make that important. Charma, how about you?
So very similar to Crystal, track for me was a vehicle to get to where I wanted to go in the future. So my parents always instilled in me that we would love for you to be a professional athlete and to go to the Olympics, but chances of that happening, not very likely. So make sure you focus on the things that you can control, which are your grades and the efforts that you're putting into becoming an adult and having a career. So when I got to college and I started lifting weights and competing, I knew that I wasn't going to be an Olympian and really use that to help me, focus on how can I leverage track to get to where I want to go. So one of the things that I saw that I really enjoy doing outside of, the schoolwork and networking with the professors was taking on recruits and hosting the recruit and their parents during campus and really understanding the business and the recruiting aspect of track and field and how it worked with getting new student athletes to the university, and leverage my relationship with my coach and being able to just get more insight into sports management. It also helped that I was a sports management student. So using track in my existence on the track team to help me get some more just experience that I could eventually add to my resume. So using track, leveraging what I was doing on the track team, and then also trying to volunteer with the time that I did have as much as possible to make sure that I had some substantial experience to put on my resume once I was ready to move on from sports.
I love that. And for those of us who may not have had the best relationship with our coaches, time to repair that, right?
Yes,
You didn't get the playing time needed, but most of the time when you're transitioning into the real world, the first thing they say is, okay, well, let's see, you were a student athlete. Maybe we'll call your coach and see. And it's like, wait, let me just, no, I'm just kidding. No, all great stuff. And I think leveraging those relationships are one of the things that I hear from all three of you. Now, what about what you wish you had known about the transition? Is there something that you think about now and you're like, wow, had I only utilized that one thing, it might have been a little easier? And any of you could start that want to answer that.
And
I can go ahead. Oh,
go, Courtney. Go ahead.
Okay. Something I kind of wish I would have known back then, I feel like you take for granted because your entire life as an athlete, you have teammates. And it's not that every single day, like, you get their opinions on things or you get their help with things, but it's the fact that, like, in the back of your mind, you had their support. And when you leave college, you're kind of on your own. And I wish I would have, known that was going to hurt a little bit more. I didn't realize that at the time when I had teammates, and I don't think, it's not like I was mean to them, but I didn't appreciate them and everything that they did for me. And I knew that, if I needed help with anything, I would call one of them and they would come. And that's just not, once I moved away from my college town, that's something that I wish I would have known that I was losing.
And then for me, it was lonely. I was a lone senior. So I didn't have other people that were in my predicament, like, hey, how's your day going since you're not having to do weights or you have all this time on your hands. And for me also, I went from a small Division II school, Henderson State University, to the University of Arkansas for my grad program. So at Henderson State, I can just walk anywhere on campus and they're like, hey, Crystal, how are you doing? Like, that's just who I was because I was so involved on campus. And then I went to University of Arkansas where no one knew my name. And it was just so weird because everyone always knew me. And then I came there and I'm just like, okay, well, I feel like I'm a nobody now. This is what people feel like when they're not involved in things. Thankfully, I did get involved in a lot of other things once school started, but that's what was the hardest part of my transition, was getting used to the fact that, like, Crystal, you're no longer an athlete. No one really cares about, like, who you are anymore, but what can you do for me right now? So that was kind of like the hardest part for me as far as the transition.
Sounds like both of you guys, Courtney and Crystal, like, you look around and, different environment, kind of scary,
Mhm.
especially after
Mhm.
4 years or sometimes more of just building those relationships and people knowing you and having that automatic trust. Definitely tough. Sharma, what was the hardest part of transition for you, or something you wish you knew? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest thing is hitting on identity, just being prepared to reinvent who you are. My schedule, I think everybody, your schedule, what you eat, when you do things, what you wear is defined by being an athlete in the sport that you play. And then once that is over and you don't have to say, oh, well, I can't do this today. Like that would be my excuse. I couldn't do this because I have practice. And like my friends asking me to go somewhere with them, and I'm like, I don't have practice. So you don't really have an excuse. But just making sure that you're comfortable with who you are and you know who you are, because you lose a little bit of that once you stop playing your sports. And it's not in a bad way, but you get the opportunity to find another part of yourself. And so that was something that I didn't think would have been not necessarily an issue, but a challenge in realizing, hey, you are that saying you're more than an athlete. You really are more, and you got to figure out what those parts are of you.
It's actually a great segue to my next question, because I hear branding as you're talking about, like, who are you in that next phase? How do you show up in the world? And, I was no longer LaChina, the shot blocker, the center, all those things that defined me on campus, the sociology major. What are some examples of ways that you guys have built your brand as a young professional? Charma, we'll go right back to you on that one.
I would say, it's funny because it ties back into sports, but it's just not the things that, like, the accolades that you get from playing the sport, but it's my work ethic. Nobody's going to outwork me. And I told, like, I'm going to performance evaluation meetings with my manager. I'm like, I know I worked hard on that. Like, I'm really big on my work ethic and being a team player. And I will say those are some things that I would say that people would recognize me as, and the things that I pride myself on, that I want to see my team succeed. And I put the work in professionally and personally.
Branding, Crystal or Courtney, how have you branded yourself as young professionals?
I know for me personally is that I am really good at building relationships because, there is this saying that, you don't get this position about what you know, it's about who you know, but I believe that's false. I believe about it's who knows you, because I know a lot of people, but they may not know me. And so that's what I have been able to do to build my brand as a professional, because it has gotten me into doors that you wouldn't have imagined. Just based off the people that know me know that, again, like, my work ethic is unmatched. And the fact that they know I'm going to get the work done, and they know that I have integrity about everything that I do as well.
Branding for you, Courtney?
Yeah, I would say that just making sure that you do include the skills that you learned in your sport. Mine specifically are time management and teamwork. Those are my top two. But I think a lot of athletes forget about the lessons they learned through sport, and those are really important. And then also making sure that, there's a ton of professional brands out there, and making sure that your personality shines through, and make sure, be different. Make sure when people see your resume that, they're going to think, who is this? And they're going to be interested. So just making sure that your personality shows in your brand.
Yeah, knowing how to sell those qualities of a student athlete in your post collegiate career are very important. And you said yours were time management. What's the other one?
And teamwork.
And teamwork. Mine would definitely be communication. I'm going to communicate. I was that person that was shouting out what defense we were in. I was that person who was, making sure we were all gathered in the right places at the right time. Like, that was naturally who I was, and communication continues to be a huge part of what I do now. What are some other things, Charma and Crystal, that you guys, you find are transferable skills into the real world from being student athletes?
I would say preparation, and that's not the term that I'm looking for, but that's what comes to mind. And I think as a student athlete, we put a lot of focus on preparing, whether it's for the season, for the game, and that's like your off season. And I think the people, when I interact with from a hiring perspective, or even just my colleagues and peers at work, the people who prepare, so you come to the meeting prepared, you are given a presentation, and you really know yourself, but people who put the time in and really are prepared to speak to their work and to what they're doing and selling or anything else like that.
And I think for me, being self-disciplined, being a self-starter, but also being competitive, because even though I'm an entrepreneur, I do some dealing in sales, and so it's like, okay, well, it's a no, but it means not right now, but I can come back to you any other time. Like, I'm going to make sure I get that sale. But then going back to like self-discipline, like, because of the work that I did as a student athlete, I know I have to show up every day. I know I have to give my all. I know I have to go to every meeting, making sure that I'm going to close this deal. So that has helped me because of like my sport.
One of the things, and those are all excellent qualities. One of the things that I think was most challenging kind of at making that transition was, as a student athlete, when you're a freshman, your coach may say, okay, this year we want you to shoot 50% from the floor, or we want you to bench press 120 pounds, or, so you kind of have these markers already set in for you, right? We're all trying to make dean's lists or get all A's, so that's a natural goal. But how did you each go about setting specific goals? Like, once you were out of being a student athlete, how did you know, okay, I don't know, I want to get this kind of job, and in 2 years I want to do this, or after I have this experience, I need to transition to that, or I want to go to 5 professional development events a year so I can network, or whatever kind of goals that you had that have gotten you on track. How did you go about the goal setting process? Courtney, we'll start with you.
I would say that coming out of college, I really wanted to get a job that dealt with sports and also marketing. I didn't want to, lower my standard and get a job I knew I could get. I really wanted something to do with sports because I knew I was super passionate about that, and I knew that I was going to miss volleyball a lot. So I wanted to stick with it. And I mean, I ended up getting a part-time job at Her Next Play. And once I got that, I think my next goal was getting, the next part, the full-time job with something to do with sports and marketing. And then I got that. So I think goal setting for me is just not lowering my standards to be able to, get that job I know I can get. It's really like pushing myself to kind of go for my dream job.
Love that. Shaharma or Crystal? Crystal.
I'll go. So for me, usually I am like a vision person. I usually see the bigger goal, and then sometimes I don't see the steps to go into that goal. So I know for me as a student athlete, what our coaches would do is like, these are our top 3 goals that we want to do for the season. And then they would break it down to like, well, in order to get to these top goals, you have to do this, do this, do this. And so now I've taken my bigger vision and I've created, instead of it being a to-do list, which is, I feel like sometimes is like, oh, well, I'm dreading to do my to-do list. I call it a to thrive list. So in order for me to thrive, to get to the next level, I need to do this. And so that's how I've been able to set specific career goals about what I'm going to do next within my business as well as in life.
Thrive list. I just wrote that down. I love that. Yes. Sharma.
For me, I think after leaving sports and graduating, I had to like really put into perspective that adulting is a process. Your career is a process. Like, there's steps that have to be taken. And I think being in human resources and talent acquisition now, I see a lot of people that want to skip multiple steps in the process and be VP or whatever the goal is. So one, I found the first part is accepting and embracing the process. Like, there is the steps that you're going to have to go through. Clearly defining what your goals are. So each year I try to set goals that change, that have some flexibility in them, that they may change 6 months in. I'm like, that really wasn't a realistic goal, or hey, your priorities are changed. This is a new goal. And then personally setting check-ins with myself. So quarterly, I'll say, okay, where are you at with this? And how are we tracking? And then professionally, I still have that big play on the coaching/mentorship relationship. I love feedback. And I think professionally, one of the things that we forget sometimes is very similar to like a sport that you played. If you're a basketball player, football player, whatever position or sport that you played, if you wanted to be a starter, you had to figure out what you needed to do to become a starter. And the same thing goes for your career. Like if you want to be a marketing manager, you need to sit down with whoever your supervisor or your manager is and figure out what does it take to be successful in this role? Like, what are you looking for? And then what can I do to get there, so that you can check in with yourself that if you're doing X, Y, and Z, the steps that have been laid out, you should be able to obtain or achieve that goal.
I love that. Feedback is so important, because at the center of feedback is self-awareness. Like when you know who you are and when you know what the expectations are, what you have to do to get to that next step, it allows you to be that much more focused on your goals and eventually where you want to be. And feedback can hurt sometimes, but I think you put on your tough skin and your willingness to understand, okay, I've got to do these things to get to where I want to go. Those are people that want to help you, essentially, you know? And I think for me, even getting into broadcasting, that was one of the first steps to me figuring out that this was a career that I may want to get to, was asking people around me, like, what makes me different? Like, what do you come to me for? Like, what kind of things do you think I'm really good at? And that feedback, obviously I have the feelings about myself as well, but combined with how other people saw me allowed me to then excel from there. Curious about how you have pitched yourself. I mean, there's a very competitive market out there, especially in sport, for entrepreneurship, if you're trying to get funds or whatever the situation may be. How have you learned to kind of brag on yourself, something that women sometimes are uncomfortable with, in a confident way that is more of marketing yourself? How have you developed your pitch? Just jump in.
For me, I make it 60 seconds or less. And when I first started my business, and I was telling a lady that I didn't want to brag too much about myself because I wanted to be more about like the people that I serve. And she told me something that I still use today. And she said, it's not bragging if it's true. So when she said that, I'm like, well, since you said that, okay, well, let me brag some more. Because again, I accomplished this. But then I also put work behind it. It's not like something that I didn't deserve to get this, or I didn't deserve to get here because of what I've done. And so that's how I've been able to pitch my stuff to other people. And I also practice in the mirror, because sometimes it's hard for me coming from my background, and it's hard for me to look people in the eyes because I was raised a little differently. And so when I pitch to other people, it's like, Crystal, make sure you look them in the eyes, make sure you have this contact with them. And so that's how I do it. Even with the pitch competitions I've done for my business, I practice in the mirror and I record myself, and I go over and over and over it just to make sure that I don't mess up and I know what I'm talking about to investors or the pitch judges.
Excellent advice. I mean, until you see yourself, sometimes you don't know what you look or sound like, right? You're like, wow, I thought I was excited when I say that. You play it back, and it's like, not as much. So it's always good to have that awareness. Or you may pick up that you use your hands a little more than you want. You pick up on those little things that you don't realize you do. Some people may think that's excessive. I think that's called preparation. Courtney, Charma, how have you guys developed your pitch?
Well, I was actually a state speech competitor in high school.
Okay.
So, yeah. So if you're not familiar with speech, there's competitions every weekend, and you get really used to seeing kids just stand at walls and talk to walls and say their speech. So with my pitch, I really am repetitive, and I practice not in front of a mirror, but in front of a wall, just because that's what I used to do in high school. But when it comes to kind of bragging, I talk a lot about this with middle school and high school girls with my CS workshops. But it's something that I've kind of struggled with as I've grown up, after, I'm sure all of you can relate to this, but after I graduated and I moved to a new city, a lot of people, asked me, well, were you good at volleyball? And I kind of struggle, and I usually, I'm trying to change it, but I used to say, oh yeah, like I was pretty good. And instead just saying, no, yeah, I was an All-American and all conference 3 times in a row. And that's like Crystal said, that's factual. It's not about bragging. It's about being true to yourself and being able to, say your achievements. So especially with a pitch, my advice is start with your achievements. Just go for it right away, because I like to kind of challenge and think, you know, the men and the male athletes, they're not holding back on their achievements. So it's really about being confident in yourself, and also realizing that the people you're pitching to, they want to hear your achievements. It's not, if they want to hire you, they want to know what you did. So it's not bragging, it's just being confident in what you've done.
And I'm sure Charma could speak to that as far as the talent acquisition side of what people want to hear. But just a quick point, I think sometimes that what we don't recognize as former athletes is the more you achieved, the more it says about you, honestly. And that's just the way the world works. And not to say that the people that weren't on all conference weren't working as hard as you were, but you separated yourself, which took time, dedication, that consistency of even being able to do it year after year after year. I mean, that says a lot for who you are without even having to break down all the things that go into that level of achievement. Charma, pitch, would you probably have some good insight for us on this, what you do now.
Yeah, so like when you're pitching, so it's kind of different approaches to giving your pitches when you're pitching yourself, and you're maybe talking to new clients or customers or whatever the case is. So that one I always recommend to be really 60 seconds, like Crystal said, practice it and rehearse it, and be concise. And I think it's the approach that Courtney was saying, like sometimes you just feel a little bit uncomfortable just coming out and saying your accomplishments. But I'll give you an example. I used to say, oh, I was really fast when I was younger, instead of saying I was a national champion when I was younger. And that brings so much weight to what you're saying. And no one has a question about it. It's like, hey, well, you were fast. Well, how fast were you? Like, it just takes care of it. So then you make your point. And then in regards to interviewing and talking about your resume, I think the biggest thing is talking about what you did, why you did it, and how you did it. And there's often times where I'm interviewing someone and 5 minutes later, I'm like, okay, can you just summarize what you did? And
Right.
So if you can look at your experience, and if you're going for a job opportunity, if you can look at your resume and highlight with each job, this is what I did, this is why I did it, and this is how I did it, and you can cover that, you should be okay in your interviews.
Love it. Hope everybody's taking notes. Y'all got some good, really good advice on pitches there. In a time like, especially what we're facing now in our world, opportunities, we don't know what they're going to be like to come by, right? And even, graduating, I remember saying, well, how do you know if jobs are open? Like, times have changed. When I was younger, my mother would have a newspaper and be like, okay, look at the ads, and that's how you figure out. How have you guys navigated or been proactive about finding opportunities in your career? I know there's an entrepreneurship side to this too. So on the flip side of that, how have you maybe taken some risks to create opportunities in your career?
I would say that I network. I think that's the biggest thing. I think obviously, and Crystal hit on this earlier, it's not who you know, but who knows you. It's the truth. I remember getting the PGA Tour opportunity that I had that led into my first job post-college, and someone contacted me about it because they thought I would be a great fit. So really, I think it starts by networking and making sure that you're putting in the work and that you are exemplifying the type of employee or coworker or whatever peer you will be to someone else, and making sure that when an opportunity comes up, that you're the first person that comes to mind.
Courtney, Crystal?
Courtney, I can go.
You can go, yeah.
So for me, I'm, again, an entrepreneur, but when I finished college, I didn't see a position in college athletics or in professional sports at the time, so I made my own. And that was one of the reasons why I created a business. But because of that and because of my experience, I now have a position at a venture capital fund in New York. So it's a VC and residence fund. And so we're looking at deals not only to be the next $1 billion idea, but also getting athletes and professional athletes and college athletes involved as well. So that's kind of literally up my alley. So because of that, what I've been able to do, I've been able to volunteer with the Women's Final Four doing their outreach program for former players. I did an internship with the NFLPA, so I worked in the licensing department. And so because of my experience, or because of the opportunities that I created for myself, I was able to get those internships based off, again, relationship building, my experience as a business owner or an entrepreneur. And now I'm in a position where, again, will add more value to my clients or my student athletes that I'm working with currently.
Love it. Courtney.
I would say similar to Crystal, I created this online campaign my junior year of college. And I think that that really helped me because I wasn't allowed, as probably a lot of you too, I wasn't allowed to have an internship until volleyball was over, until that second semester. So being able to create an online campaign and give me experience and be able to put those graphics I made on my portfolio, the website I made on my portfolio, all that stuff, I was way ahead of the game by making that opportunity. And I also networking as well, but I more specifically going to events, finding, you know, the University of Minnesota has the Women's Coaches Symposium with the Tucker Center. And I knew that I was passionate about women in sports. So I found that event, bought a ticket, and I went, ended up meeting her next play. But just finding networking events about what you're passionate about as well, I think is a really big key.
Yeah, I really enjoyed professional development. Go ahead, Charmer. You had a thought on that.
I was just going to add one more thing, and I'm glad you both said that. This one of the biggest things that we talk about in our family, and I have a family full of former student athletes and a few people who play professionally, but the transition and during college and then transitioning out of college when you're just starting your career is really the only time we have to give our talents away for free. And as a student athlete, it is very difficult to find paid opportunities and also like for internships, and also manage, if you're really competitive, managing your workouts and your schedules with your teams. But if you have a free opportunity, don't feel like that's not enough for you or you're too good for it. Sometimes those free opportunities and showing that you're willing to do the work when it's not paid is what gets you those nicely paid opportunities. So this right now, if you are a person coming out of school right now, this is the only time that you can really give your talents away for free or for a very inexpensive price. So definitely don't skip out on those opportunities. Sorry.
No, that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. It's also a way sometimes to earn transition skill that you may not have gotten in school. You know, I remember thinking, oh, well, I got my degree, so, you know, I've already learned everything I'm going to need to know at a job. Not at all. Actually, volunteering, job shadowing, that can open your eyes a lot to other things, other skills you need to develop. And even sometimes for some people, I want to go back to school, you know, to do what I really want to do. But that free work, it may not look good on paper, but it can be a huge advantage as you're transitioning, especially when you haven't had the opportunity to get the internships. And going back to the point about professional development, you know, when you go to a professional development event, it's like those are people who are there to network. Like you have a room full of people who are all signed up to meet other people. And the important part about some of those events is you get to meet in person. Like email, you know, obviously we say, you want to ask, can we have coffee? Can I meet you sometime? That's ideal. But when you go to an event, you have a room full of people right there that you can pitch to in person. They get a feel for who you are. So it's just a great environment. So definitely going to professional development. And you may find yourself at something that didn't appeal to you before, that you may find out, oh, you know what? I didn't know if I was interested in this or not, but through this event, it might be something I want to look into. So all very valuable. Let's dive a little bit more individually into some things that you guys have done. Courtney, I'll start with you. You talked about the See Us movement, which I just think is outstanding what you've done. How have you used social media to build See Us, the brand, and your brand as well? I know you mentioned the graphics and some of those things, but social media seems like, especially these days, a way to just further reinforce your brand.
Yeah, so for the See Us kind of brand and following, I started with using my personal accounts because I knew that my followers were a lot of sports fans, a lot of female athletes. And I posted about the See Us movement on my account a couple years ago. Just with the logo, why I started it, what it was. And then a lot of female athletes surprised me and they started posting about it with the hashtag See Us and tagging See Us movement with all of their stories about being underrepresented, sexualized, things like that. So they helped me out a lot because all of their followers then started following See Us. So that was kind of like the big thing, was using my personal social media accounts to get the CS social media account going. But then also recently I've been trying to be creative during this difficult time. So every Friday, starting this Friday, we're going to have fitness Fridays. I've been doing live Instagrams with, professional female athletes, collegiate female athletes, women that work in sports like yourself, people like that, to just try and gauge interest during this unfortunate time, get people going, thinking about their careers, thinking about sports, staying in sports, things like that. So being creative is really important, especially during this time on social media. But for my personal brand, I'm being creative as well. I've been partnering with female-owned small businesses during this time, these past couple months, and doing giveaways. Giveaways are a great way to build your brand, especially when you partner with amazing women like I do. I probably gain over 80 followers just on those per giveaway. So I think it's all about just being really creative, knowing your brand, knowing your audience. A lot of girls that follow me know that I'm all about positive body image, so posting about that. Yeah, it's just kind of coming up with a marketing plan and just going for it.
I love that. And if you have not had a chance, if you guys are in the audience, please check out the CS movement. It's incredible. And to think that you were kind of finding your way when you started getting to all that is just impressive, balancing your academics and everything else, that you were doing as you were starting to formulate the ideas of what you wanted to do. Crystal, I know you're big into entrepreneurship. So you started Student Athletes Unite right out of business school. What was one of the most challenging things about starting your own business, and how did you overcome that challenge?
I tell people all the time I'm still overcoming it because I'm still learning. When I first started my business, a lot of people saw that I was young. So sometimes in business, people think you're not an expert because you're young. And what has helped me were my mentors, and then also being around people that I knew that could help me in the long run. And then my business technically helps student athletes create businesses, stay eligible and explore entrepreneurship as a career. And so when I started this in 2016, nobody was really talking about helping student athletes create businesses, personal brands, business brands. But now, because of the NCAA rules and the regulations are now shifting, then it's like now my business is coming in the forefront. And so again, like I think Charma said that, if you're not willing to do something for free, then you may not get those big bucks. And so because I started doing a lot of stuff for free and getting those testimonials and going to university, speaking for free, or getting to those career fairs. So now it's like they see me as an expert because of all the work that I did prior. And so hopefully one day it'll pay off in the long run. But I'm still going through those challenges, but they're a little easier for me.
One piece of advice that I hear a lot of athletes giving is like, the one thing you can do while you're in college, like you may not be able to be full-time or even part-time employed somewhere, but you can start something of your own. Right. Just figuring out what it is you're passionate about at that time, and then starting something. We all have that fear of, do I know what I'm doing? Doesn't matter, just try, right? Try to create a website, try to use, your teammates and your fellow students. Everyone has some skill. You can leverage that, right? Like I'll say one of my friends designed my first website. So you tap into all of that, but starting something of your own can be one of the most rewarding things you do starting out. Charma, let's go back to the PGA Tour and talk a little bit about that. How did you leverage your experience as a student athlete to connect with that internship and then later a job opportunity? Can you take us through those steps? I know you talked a little bit about your coach and some of that, but how it developed, and as you reflect on it, what can our audience learn from your experience?
Yeah, so majoring in sports management, and being a track runner, I thought I was going to work for USA Track and Field and run sponsorship there or something along the lines of USA Track and Field. And I actually interned at USA Track and Field in the summer of 2012, so during the Olympic year. So it was really fun. But I found out that it wasn't for me. And it was kind of like a punch in the gut, because I was like, this is what I wanted to do my whole life. And it just wasn't what I eventually saw myself or should have been doing in my career after. So after that, I kind of took a step back and figured out, like, if you really like a sport and if you're working in it, sometimes it can take that joy or the passion that you have for it away. like golf, but not the biggest fan of golf. Like it's nothing that I followed my entire life. So ended up hearing about an opportunity in regards to the PGA Tour, and we got like a blast about it through a Syracuse listserv. And my professor ended up contacting me and said, this would be a great opportunity for you, because they knew that the track and field thing didn't work out. And it did an interview, and it really worked out. And it actually was, my first role was the volunteer recruitment intern. And I had some experience helping out with recruiting on the track and field team. So showing around recruits. So I had a little bit of like, at least how to convince people to come to participate in something. And then also I worked in the collegiate chapter of Women in Sports and Events, so WISE at Syracuse, and helped recruit members for the organization, and then also recruit people to help us host our first symposium. So all those things sprinkled together landed me a volunteer coordinator role at the PGA Tour, where I was responsible for recruiting and managing about 1,000 volunteers who paid us to work for free. And the ability and the things that I learned from track was, dealing with teammates or different personalities and different people from different backgrounds and getting them to work together. And that's kind of how I got successful in just leading that team. And it took off and landed into a full-time job with the PGA Tour. And I eventually ran a major championship for the PGA Tour Champions, which is the senior tour for the PGA Tour.
I love that you weren't afraid to go in the wrong direction ultimately, right? Like you went in the way that your heart and your passions were telling you, and it ended up not being right. But sometimes you got to try. And I think one of the great values of that in-between experience, whether it be an internship or a volunteer or shadow, whatever, you can say, you know what, that's not for me. And that's all part of the process too. So I love that aspect of your story. All right, so we're gonna take some time before we end up, time is running here, and take a few questions from our audience, from the chat. So the first one comes from Abigail. Do you all have mentors? If so, how did the mentorship relationship start?
I know I can speak to that. For me, starting in college, again, building those relationships in college, I still have those as my mentors today. They are, I think, the dean of the College of Education. One is the AD. He's now, I believe, at some school in Arizona. But again, it's just those relationships that I built in college and stayed and cultivated them. Whether it was going by their office or maybe send them an email after the game and say, hey, thanks for coming to the game. I'll see you in class tomorrow. Just some of those things that I've been able to build. And as far as like the new mentors that I've gained, still the same thing, building relationships, asking how can I add value to them before having them add value to myself or my business.
Anyone else on mentors and those relationships?
I would say that the best mentors that I have right now after college, because like we talked about in the beginning, a lot of the mentors we had in college were our professors, our coaches, people that were put into our life on purpose. And then you kind of come out of college and you're scrambling. But the best ones that I've made are the ones that I've met naturally. It's not somebody random that I've asked, through email or through LinkedIn to be my mentor. It's kind of the ones that I don't even like actually call them mentors. They just happen naturally. And I know that I can go to them for advice and career advice, anything. So I would say the people that you ask for advice that come to your mind right away are the ones that are your natural mentors.
And I echo both of what Courtney and Crystal say. My mentors have kind of happened naturally. They actually started off as managers who turned into friends who are mentors, but essentially they just give me perspective. Like I think right now we have just so much information and so much access to what other people's lives are like, or what other people are doing and what you're doing, and trying to marry all that up together can sometimes just cause confusion. And I turn to former colleagues and managers who can give me perspective on like, all right, this is an outside perspective of what I hear you're saying that you're going through, or the advice that you think that you need. and someone who can kind of help you or just listen to you talk this out and give you just insights on what, you know, their perspective may be for a solution for you or for guidance on next steps in your career or something. So really people who can give you perspective, and ultimately comes down to a person who wants the best for you. So you want someone who has a little bit of an investment in your success and wants to see you do well, so that, you know, you're getting good advice from good people.
Love that. I found also that I think strategy, even though you can't always control who you're connecting with, but strategy sometimes helps, because you often need an advocate depending on what industry you're in. I mean, you know, these days it's not that people are going to look at your reference sheet. It's like they're expecting a call from someone that's going to vouch for you, right? So there's the mentor and the advocate. I've heard all those different, you know, buckets, whatever you want to call them. But you know, you do want to definitely be a little strategic about trying to find mentors in the industry that you're in, who are at a level that you're trying to achieve to get to, that can say, okay, when I was where you are 5 years in, I was making this much money, or you should be making more money, or, you know, some of those tough conversations, because they have been where you are. Definitely the strategy behind it. Okay, let's see if we can get at least one more question in here. Along those same lines, is there a recommended best method for reaching out when you're trying to network? LinkedIn, email. I mean, I was going on about those professional development events. We don't know when those will be coming back. So it is a lot about, you know, sending emails and sometimes just cold instances. Any recommendations? And Charma, I can start with you maybe on what those correspondences should look like.
So it's tricky because I think it's different, for everyone. Like, I know I'm on LinkedIn all the time because that's part of my job, but some people don't check on LinkedIn enough. So I think it's okay to do LinkedIn or emails. And if you have a phone number and you feel comfortable that you have that type of relationship to contact that person, just figuring out the means that they respond better to. So once you do get initial contact for them, if they are emailing you, email them, don't send them LinkedIn. If they call you, don't keep texting them, because they're showing you the form of communication that they prefer. So I think that's the first thing. The other thing is, be sure to not just contact people when you need something. That's like my biggest pet peeve. And as people who are higher up and they are getting recommendations or sought after for calls and things all the time, you don't want to just feel like you're only being contacted when someone needs you. So be sure to send those communications. If it's a birthday, figure out their birthday and write a note. And social media is wonderful because it tells you all that information now, but send them a birthday message. If it's a holiday or quarterly, like if you're thinking of someone, make sure you're communicating with them outside of the times that you need something from a person or a contact.
Crystal or Courtney, any advice on what that correspondence, email, LinkedIn should look like when you're trying to network?
I think, again, just going on, making sure your personality shines through. Don't just send a generic, you know, email or LinkedIn message or on social media. Make sure you make yourself stand out. Tell them something interesting about you. Tell them why you think they're interesting or why you want to know what they do. Just make sure that you're not being generic, because I feel like a lot of people, especially during this time, are getting a lot of messages. So just make sure you stand out.
And what I usually do, I know that it's 6 degrees of separation for you to get to know someone or for you to find someone that may know that person. I usually reach out to somebody if I'm on their LinkedIn, like, oh, well, I know that person. Maybe they can set up an introduction to them. And that's kind of like the best way that I've been able to build relationships and to get into people's inboxes and getting on phone calls just by that alone. I rarely do cold email or cold calls just because it's weird for me. So I try to do the warm audience emails and reaching out through LinkedIn.
Love that. Get a connection. All right, really quickly, because I think we have to end up here. If you guys can, as fast as you can, give us your thoughts on what advice you would give student athletes as the brand image and likeness talk has begun for current student athletes.
Build your brand and community right now. Whether you're about to create a service or a product, because what I teach my student athletes is that you have a community of MBSs, so like your most valuable supporters, because those people are going to be the ones that are going to market your product. Even when Courtney had talked about her company, is that she posted it on her personal page and her friends shared it. That's why her awareness for her brand was able to expand faster and quicker, because of the other people that support her and like her. So that's some of the advice that I would give to the student athletes going or leading up to that, because once you do that and then you are able to monetize, you can definitely do it with ease.
I'd say be intentional and be mindful. Like now that you will have a platform and it's elevated, that what you do matters, what you say matters, how you say it matters. So now that restrictions are being loosened a little bit, like you there's no excuse of I said that when I was really young and I didn't mean it, or I didn't know enough. Like make sure you're informed if you're going to communicate or say something. Be intentional about it and be mindful of the audience that you are going to be potentially reaching.
I would say stand out. You can't start too early when it comes to connecting with people, and know that people want to help. You know, if you contact any of us three, I know that we're all going to respond and we're all going to really want to help you. So don't be afraid to take that risk and contact that person that's in your mind, because most likely they're going to want to help you out.
Love that. Crystal, Courtney, Charma, you guys are way more pulled together than I was at your age. You're definitely going back to your time as student athlete. So congratulations to all of you and how you have forged your own path and, just best utilized your time and your skill and everything you learned as student athletes to have success in the real world. Thanks also again to Audra, Sarah, Danielle. Tackle what's next in her next play. I mean, doesn't get much better than that. So hopefully if there are current student athletes or even those that have gone on that are trying to figure out how they can navigate this new space in the world, definitely check out all that is available to you.